My dear friends, I hope you hear me well. Okay, so first of all, I want to congratulate Czech Association for Psychotherapy for getting the status of National Awarding Organization of European Association for Psychotherapy. This happened in October, just recently, and it was voted on the annual general meeting. So real congratulations for you because you got some real status in the European Association of Psychotherapy. But I want to tell that it's not only an honor, it's also a responsibility. And when I'm talking about responsibility, I mean that we in our all national awarding organizations are trying to pursue the values of the European Association of Psychotherapy in every respective country we are working in. And what values and what ideals I have in mind, I will tell shortly describing the history of European Association of Psychotherapy. So this organization was established in 1991. So very soon it will be 30th birthday of the European Association. And for organization, it's not so little. Of course, in Britain, and here Patricia can tell you more, there are many organizations with millennia of existence, or at least hundreds of years. But when we are talking about the European Association, we must remember all history of Europe, and that we are actually the continent where history is written mainly by history of wars. So when you are thinking that for psychotherapy to establish itself and to connect the professionals, we need peace. We need peace. So this last peace in Europe is also not so long if to remember the Balkan Wars in 90s. So we have more or less 30 years of peace in Europe. And if to come to the work of European Association in Europe, we must first of all remember that the cornerstone on which European Association stands is Strasbourg Declaration of Psychotherapy. And this Strasbourg Declaration sets main principles on which we all must put our own efforts how to make it happen in Europe. And I think that for future, Patricia will talk. I will talk a little bit for past. So first of all, what was the main goal of European Association? It was to establish a psychotherapy as independent, separate profession with its scientific background, with its skills and knowledge necessary to practice, and with its system of checking if the skills and knowledge of the professional are sufficient to practice the profession. And also, quite an important thing is to find our own place on the horizon of different professions in Europe. And I have just one small example how difficult it is. We are trying it for 30 years, and only now, due to Patricia's Hunt very energetic efforts, we've succeeded to put to European Commission the list of 9 countries where psychotherapeutic education is uniform, goes according to the same standards, and therefore it is a background to legalize psychotherapy education as a separate and giving the right to practice is a separate profession. How we will succeed, it's also a question, but I think Patricia will describe this in better results. I want to tell what we already have been trying to do. We have been trying to pursue this goal of separate profession by different means in European Commission and European Parliament. Unfortunately, without very big success till now, but since several years, European Association of Psychotherapy joined the European Association of Liberal Professions, CEPLIS. And this means that we have a bigger European umbrella organization, which is also taking care of our political goals. But this is, let's say, high politics. If we go down to earth, what EAP did for different countries. First of all, EAP came to Balkans just after the war and tried to help to reconciliate professionals, to help them again in these Balkan countries to work together in the coping with terrible consequences of war. And our Austrian and German colleagues were coming to Balkan countries and conducting seminars, helping them to reestablish links and to find the proper psychotherapeutic interventions in coping with the post-war reality. Next thing which came to Europe was a refugee crisis. And I must say that we have in EAP a special working group to work with refugees and to establish a proper services for these really very wounded people. Next problem was about the child and family health, and EAP worked and finally created the documents about so-called parental how it's called parental abandoned syndrome, and this was used to treat children for problems which are created by parents. And therefore, this was also a working group which issued its own position statement on that. But now we have a other worldwide problem, a COVID pandemic. And here EAP started to help its members and everybody who wants to look at our website with guidelines how to work with our patients online. So we do have a special guidelines on the website of EAP. And what is main framework how we are helping our members? First of all, EAP in 2013 approved a basic job description of European psychotherapist, and it is composed of very practical descriptions what and how European psychotherapist should be able to do. Not only to learn theory, but what he must be able to do practically. And this job description was revised in 2 articles in Psychological Press, and it was very important, I suppose, the acknowledgement by the psychologist, clinical psychologist, that the job described in the clinical psychology frame and job described in the psychotherapeutic frame differ. They are not the same. So even they recognized that psychotherapy described clearly by the practical terms is different from clinical psychology. Next thing, we have since more than 20 years European Certificate of Psychotherapist. And this certificate in main European countries still is absolutely unofficial, but what it gives and what it makes. First of all, European Certificate of Psychotherapy establishes certain standards of education for psychotherapists with clear description of components, with clear description of time necessary for this education. And I think it's in a way kind of the frame of the training programs for different institutions, private institutes or state educational organizations, what makes a psychotherapeutic education. And this is very important because in this, our document, which is called ECP document, European Certificate of Psychotherapist document. In this document is very clearly stated that 2 of the 3 components are very often missing in the formal university education in many countries, because you should know that in many European countries now there are master's programs in psychotherapy science. And this is very important to listen carefully to the names. Psychotherapy science, not psychotherapy. And it means that they are learning what is psychotherapy theoretically, they are learning the research methodology, and they are scientists in psychotherapy, but they are not practitioners. Because for becoming a practitioner, 3 parts of psychotherapy education are absolutely obligatory. And this is theory, this is practice under supervision, and this is self-experience in the process of education. And there are minimal standards which must be fulfilled in these 3 parts in order to become a candidate to get the ECP. I think that for Czech psychotherapists, it's also important to read, to follow, and to reach the level of ECP training. But to make things even a little bit more complicated, the problem is that since several years in European Union, we have a document which is called European Qualification Framework, EQF. And you can easily reach this document in Czech language on the European Union website. And what EQF says? EQF says that our education has several levels. And for many people, it at the beginning looked like description of academic education. No, it is not. It is a level of education which can be reached by all lifelong learning. and it not necessarily must be some academic kind of training. And we psychotherapists decided that we must be independent profession. And what makes independent profession? Only the level 7, IQF 7, of totally 8 levels of possible education. So we see our knowledge and skills as very high and specialized. And what even more important, that this IQF 7 allows a person to put in front of himself the separate independent questions and to seek separately for his own answers. So it is independence of the professional. And of course, when we are dealing with our patients, we always put the questions and search for answers independently. We don't have the board of helpers behind my back. We are working mainly alone in our office or with group, and that means that we must be independent thinkers and practitioners. And this is EQF7. And to turn the educational programs in psychotherapy training institutes from hours, we were usually counting our education to credits, which must be a kind of measurement for EQF7. It's also some job you must do. But second way of the psychotherapy training, which is now is starting to disperse around Europe, is a direct academic training of psychotherapists. And this is not about this 2 years education on the master's level. It is a full academic training from the first year in the university, and it must encompass all necessary components for psychotherapy training. It means theory, practice under supervision, and personal self-experience during all these academic training years. And this happened in Austria. There are several parts of the University of Sigmund Freud in Austria itself, but there are also some branches of SFU across Europe. But now the main country in psychotherapy in continental Europe, I don't want to insult Brits, because British psychotherapy is one of the biggest in the world. But when we are talking about continental Europe, so biggest psychotherapy group is in Germany. And German psychotherapy is very much regulated by the state. And now they decided that psychotherapy indeed is a separate profession, and therefore they established the requirements that psychotherapists must be trained in the universities according to the normal university training scheme from the maturational level, from the school to the bench of the university. So this is a trend which started, but I am sure that in 15, 20 years, this approach to training of psychotherapists will be widespread across Europe. I have no doubts about that. So I want you, my dear Czech colleagues, to prepare yourself to the necessary structural changes and to finding the good ways of cooperation with academical institutions, because what academical institutions have, they have the state license to issue diploma. But what they don't have knowledge and skills to educate psychotherapists. Only you have these skills and knowledge. Therefore, in a way, you need each other. And please look, what are the possibilities? How can you deal productively with this situation in your own country? And probably I already used all my time I did have for my speech, and I am very grateful for your invitation to see you and to talk to you. I understood that for some of you I was too political, and therefore some people disappeared from the screens, but for some it seems interesting enough. So dear Jirka, I don't know if we will have questions and answers already now, or we have it later after Patricia Hunt will speak.
There are some other possibilities. One is that after your speeches, you will move to lobby room and you will meet with people who will have some other questions. But because of time, now it's possibility, jestli někdo byste se chtěl zeptat, mít nějaký koment k Eugeniovu příspěvku, tak buď to můžete udělat teď přímo, nebo můžete napsat do chatu a jeden z překladatelů ho přednese. Čili jestli cokoliv máte teďka v mysli a chtěli byste říct, tak máme proto čas. So we have now time for a few questions or remarks to Eugeniu's part.
I have a question. I wanted to ask you about insurance coverage for psychotherapists across Europe. If you could just briefly describe what the situation is at the moment in various countries, if there are countries where psychotherapy is covered currently by national health insurance companies.
So let's start from the countries which have already a law or state regulation of psychotherapy as a profession. And these countries now are more than 9, which were required. It seems to me 11, but Patricia will correct me if I am wrong. And in these countries, mainly psychotherapy reimbursement goes from the state or private insurance companies. There are other countries where psychotherapy still is not legitimized as a profession. For example, in Poland, in Lithuania, in Latvia, but in these countries, psychotherapy is also covered by the state or private insurance. The problem is that usually insurance companies are trying to pose a limit how long the therapy can take. And therefore, for example, in Lithuania, we have 24 sessions per patient per year per diagnosis. So 3 criteria, and for all these 24 sessions. So this is in many countries indeed reimbursed, but there are big countries where it is not the case. More questions, please?
I would like to ask you about Spain, because I heard that their psychotherapy was moved to the field of healers, or this kind of helping. So I don't know if there is situation a bit better since there, or is it still the same? Thank you.
First of all, let's start from the description that psychotherapy as such is not the universe field. There are different approaches in psychotherapy, as we call in EAP modalities. And in Spain, some modalities were put outside the mainstream of treating professions, not all psychotherapy. And we have put quite an effort to improve that situation for our Spanish colleagues. We have written from EAP side the letters, what approaches of psychotherapy are considered scientific in EAP. And we have in EAP quite strict criteria when we are accepting any modality into EAP structure. We have so-called 15 questions, and if in their answers to these questions, the approach is recognized as credible and scientific, only then we accept them. But that means also that when we are trying to intervene in any country's policy of accepting or non-accepting, we already have a material, an argument to put in front of the officials in that separate country. So we tried to help, and as far as I know, in Spain, this is still in process. We will see how it will go.